Unlike just about every other institution and product in our economy, transparency is missing from education. The connection economy destroys the illusion of control. This quote from Seth Godin has been living rent-free in my head for the past few days. It's from his free PDF called Stop Stealing Dreams. Search for it. It's really easy to find online, but I'll put a link for it down below. It came out over 10 years ago now, but it's more relevant than ever. I've basically highlighted the entire thing, and I wanted to make a video specifically on this one quote. This quote is pretty profound, almost, self-evident when you think about it, but just profound in what it is, what it's meaning, how it's revealing such a dark truth about our society, our education system, and what our children are going through. When I first read it, it resonated with me very deeply. I mean, transparency is just not a component of public education. In today's public schools, students have no idea why they're learning what they're learning. If there's ever a question for what is being taught, why it's being taught, and whether or not it can be taught in a better way, those questions are dismissed as irrelevant. They're just shut down. Now, I know there's some good-hearted teachers out there who do their best to really connect with their students. If you think about your own experience with a favorite teacher, I'm willing to bet they resonated with you so much because they were open, they communicated, and they respected you as a human being. In a word, they were transparent with you. But the design of the system is such that this kind of relationship is virtually impossible to cultivate. I'm pretty confident that it's now universal throughout most public schools in the US that students rotate classes and teachers in between periods. So it's like, what relationship, what strong bond are you going to form with a teacher in that kind of environment? It's really difficult. And if a teacher likes a class or is really invigorated by the curiosity of a class, how much can they really cultivate that curiosity? How much engagement do you think they can get out of those students when a really exciting lesson is interrupted by a bell and the next time they're going to meet is 48 hours later? It's just not practical, and the school system makes it that way. We talk constantly about kids needing to change. We talk about attention spans, about phones. I myself am really focused on talking about Generation Alpha and their trajectory. But apart from funding, we almost never talk about the deficiencies of the public education system. It's almost like the problems are self-evident, but the bureaucracy and the waste and the confusion and the poor application of resources is just too much. It's too overwhelming. It's something we all know has major problems, but few are daring enough to challenge the inertia and offer an alternative. It seems like no one knows where to start. So, today I want to offer a place to start. I want us to talk about the reality of our education system, specifically in this day and age. I want to talk about that quote I started the video off with and what it actually means, and why it has a huge implication for how future generations are going to learn. In almost every other part of life, transparency is expected. It's a foundation of successful institutions. Transparency establishes trust. It helps us fulfill expectations. Without transparency, we are at the whim of fraud, scammers, and deceitful people. In our society and successful societies throughout history, transparency is cultivated in countless ways. Consumers demand transparency when they buy a product. Our established norm in the US is that food products must have expiration dates, lists of ingredients, and nutritional information. When we make exceptions to those standards, it's usually in a higher trust situation like a farmer's market, a place where we can actually interact and speak directly to the farmer, or the producer, or the manufacturer. Transparency is fundamental to how our government functions. We cannot cultivate a meaningful democracy without full disclosure on who our elected officials are, what they represent, and how they are getting funded. If any of those things are compromised, trust is diminished. Disclosure is a fundamental component of a high-trust society. When large swaths of a population are kept in the dark about what their tax dollars are being spent on, or what they're eating, or who is actually running things, whether or not their money has real value, they should be unafraid to demand disclosure of those things. They should be equipped with the skills and knowledge to demand society operate in an honest way. So, in light of that, I ask you, what do you think? Is our education system operating this way? Do you think the curriculum, the testing, the standards, the funding, the way the entire system works is transparent? Do you think parents are in full control of what their children learn, what their children experience in the classroom? Do you think our public education system has been built on trust or complicity? Who's controlling what the system actually does? Why are its conventions what they are? Do we know? Why do we have bell systems? Why are the arts and humanities always the first things on the chopping block? Why is there never an emphasis on working in groups? Why are we still putting one teacher in front of rows of 30 desks? Why do kids need to be rotating between teachers throughout the day? Why are standardized tests the most important metric to whether or not a school gets funding? See, if a product fails, people stop using it. That's transparency. That's the market. But public education is not working like this. There's no transparency at all. Most students don't know why they're learning something. They don't know how success is measured beyond grades and test scores. And they don't know who decides what is important in the first place. Think about this as an example. Wouldn't you say it's important for our kids to learn and understand credit card debt? Do you know of one school that teaches kids about credit card debt? Parents don't often know why the curriculum is set the way it is either. It seems curriculum decisions happen behind closed doors, or at the very least, as a result of pure inertia. When all they require is a very thorough memorization of multiple choice questions, standardized tests are treated like true measures of intelligence, which is insane. For all the emphasis on getting students to comply, we've barely implemented ways we can measure and cultivate curiosity amongst our student population. Inside the public school system, there's simply no framework to nurture it. In spite of a whole bunch of literature, lots of scientific studies, lots of different confirmations on what we actually know helps children learn, public education doubles down on what it's already doing poorly. Sadly, the bureaucracy of the system makes radical changes practically impossible. So, why is education so resistant to transparency? Because transparency reveals something uncomfortable. First of all, it reveals that the majority of school rules exist for management of students, not for facilitating their learning. Second, it reveals that curriculum is rarely updated, if at all, and is imposed from the top down. And lastly, it reveals that the school structure exists because they were initially designed to get a population working for factories, not for learning. You see, public education was formulated at a time when the US was a burgeoning world power. Our economy was exploding. Our population was also full of new immigrants. How could we train people to be just capable enough to operate assembly lines, perform repetitive tasks for 10 to 12 hours a day, have a universal basic understanding of the principles that perfectly integrated with large-scale industrialization? Managing these things simultaneously meant figuring out a system that guaranteed compliant workers. That meant compelling a system that operated akin to the military, standardization with very little room for deviations, keeping systems rigid and information guarded. In a word, non-transparency. Transparency threatens authority. If students were allowed to see how arbitrary grading can be, how outdated some content is, or just how irrelevant their choices are in school compared to what they'll experience in the real world, they might start asking really dangerous questions. They might start asking, why do we do it this way? Is this test really a representation of my ability? Who is actually in charge here? Who is this serving? What would happen if we changed this approach? Institutions built on this notion of keeping a rigid framework and standardizing everything under the sun do not like questions. This leads us to the second half of the quote here. The connection economy destroys the illusion of control. In case you've been living in a cave, we aren't in the same economy we were back at the beginning of the 20th century. We are not currently industrializing. In fact, we are in a post-industrial economy. We have been for at least 30 years. The connection economy is the world we live in now. This is a world where information is everywhere. Information is abundant. Expertise isn't locked behind credentials, and learning happens on YouTube. Like it or not, today's kids are learning more on TikTok, YouTube, and social media than they are anywhere else. Kids are growing up in an environment where if something doesn't make sense, they look it up on the internet. Because why wouldn't they? Their attention is being pushed and pulled so much that their reactivity is finely tuned. If something is boring, they leave. If someone explains it better, they follow them instead. Humans are naturally wired to find the most efficient route to a better understanding. And what the internet and the connection economy has enabled is the ability for people to seek out personalized educations. Just by engaging with the internet on a day-to-day basis, kids are figuring out the world around them. It may not be in a way we approve or want, and their early engagement doesn't mean there's a wholesome, productive learning phenomena happening. But this is essential to recognize if we are going to take their education seriously. The public school model is flat out outdated. As we've already alluded, it's focused on control. And control can only really work when information is scarce, where authority is unquestioned, where there's a teacher at the front of the class, 30 students in a room, and everybody must pay attention to the teacher, no matter what the teacher is saying. This connection economy totally dismantles all of that. It destroys it all. You can't control what a student learns when knowledge is abundant. You can't control curiosity when curiosity has exits, when a child's interest has infinite outlets it can explore on the internet. And that's what the internet is. It's a playground for curiosity. You can't control attention when attention has options, right? There's such a multitude of factors that enable the child of today to learn. And not just learn, but learn in their own way, at their own pace, with the abundance of information that's out there. What the current paradigm calls a loss of control is actually an outdated, broken system trying to serve kids who see its constraints and parameters as completely irrelevant. So if you go down the rabbit hole of teacher TikTok or teacher YouTube, you will be shocked by how utterly detached from the system kids are today. You'll come away hopeless, presuming these children are completely stupid, unmanageable, and ultimately a problem for the future. It's very disheartening. Some of these stories are really unbelievable. But I think what's happening is a shift. That loss of control that teachers have over their students, especially with Gen Alpha, is a reflection of how our education system is losing its monopoly. It's losing its unquestioned authority. It's losing its ability to be the only place that learning happens. I'm of the opinion that what we're witnessing right now is not a crisis, but a transition. We're witnessing a transition from an old model being replaced by a better, updated, upgraded system, forcibly. Think about it. The very same upgrade happened to media. It happened to mainstream media. It happened to music. It happened to journalism. It happened to retail. Everything that the internet has revolutionized has had to go through the same pain. That pain is defined as a full transition away from the old ways of doing things. Transparency and connection didn't destroy those industries. For all the fear-mongering around music in the early 2000s, we somehow managed to make music the most accessible it's ever been. Ironically, the problems that felt like they were going to completely destroy the industry just helped discard the outdated modalities. New actors stepped in. Newer, better ways of music distribution were figured out. Now, accessing a song online is one of the easiest tasks on the internet. Unlike the education system, mass media's issues weren't ignored or pasted over with flowery language and funding debates. Even with massive resistance, entire industries were forced to adopt, and technology kept moving. And it nestled its way into systems that worked better and better over time. Those are the bumpy roads we needed to go down to grow and evolve. Public education is just incredibly late to this realization. So, students, especially Gen Alpha, I firmly believe this, they're not broken. They're adapted to a reality that's barely reflected in their schools. They were born and raised in the connection economy. The internet informs the majority of their lives, and that's how they're understanding the world around them. They're not understanding it through the lens of traditional education or a top-down system. They're understanding it through the lens of an abundance of information system where everything is accessible. How that pans out doesn't automatically equal 100% productive, positive outcomes. But I do think there are positives to unraveling how the top-down education system is working today, because it is undeniably broken. Bring yourself back to being a sophomore in high school. Your teacher does something like this. In a pre-calc class, they ask everyone to collaborate on how to find the area of your irregularly shaped classroom. This finding then gets used to figure out costs and practical needs for a full retiling, wallpapering, and refurnishing of the room. Your classroom must figure out who is best at what and establish ways to designate roles to each individual. As the most artistic, you are personally tasked to collaborate on a functional design scheme that enhances the atmosphere of the classroom. Your classmates may be designated with overseeing budget, furniture sourcing, contacting manufacturers, getting estimates, negotiating prices. I just made that example up off the top of my head. Imagine an environment where that kind of thinking is encouraged day in and day out, where students are asked to engage with their most intimate interests, collaborate, mix and match concepts, highlight their strengths, build confidence in their abilities, etc., etc. I'm willing to wager that even if something like that is happening in a public school environment right now, it is being actively discouraged or shut down. You see, schools must focus on testing scores, not practical real-world applications of learned knowledge. If a school did embrace this example, it would mean admitting its systems are outdated. Implementing that example would mean being actively transparent with students. It would mean treating them with enough dignity and respect to reveal something about how the real world actually works. Just process that for a minute. Rather than sitting for an entire semester working through 4 chapters of a textbook, retaining little to nothing of that information, having no practical real-world examples to engage, students could walk away from a day at school with a far more relevant awareness of their own applicable skill set. Imagine how this could reformat decisions from an administrative point of view. What kind of decisions would be made? It's almost a guarantee that learning could not be confirmed by test taking. Learning would have to be measured by real understanding. Just like measuring curiosity, as I mentioned before, tools for engaging trust, compliance, self-agency, scarcity, connection, etc. would have to be developed. This is something that I think all of the teacher TikTok and teacher YouTube are desperate for without realizing. The current situation with our kids is terrifying, and there are a lot of problems. But I think this one principle of transparency is so important. Transparency removes the safety blanket of authority and reveals how things are actually working. And if we're honest about it, we can deduce that blanket authority and control don't work very well when it comes to helping kids learn. A more transparent system opens the door for something better. I really hope you liked that. That was 27 minutes. Oh my God. That was a long... I didn't think it would be that long. I'll edit this down. Hopefully it'll be good. I had to read it because I could not perform that off the top of my head. So apologies if it sounded a little scripted. Either way, I hope the message was clear enough. And if this resonated with you, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're an artist, any of the above, I'd love to hear from you. Please comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.